So before we do that, before we get into the sort of the societal, cultural stuff, one last teshuvah. Again, we could go on. There's much, much more. But I want to do one last teshuvah, which is from Yedideinu. You probably know Rabbi Evers, who was Rav in Dusseldorf, and he still serves on the base by us. And he's written a multi-volume set of teshuvahs called V'Shov V'Rofa, and you have it. It'll say on the top of in the bundle. It says Siman Ayin Tes. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech. You should. Please tell me you have it. Yes, everybody has it from last time. Awesome. Well done, guys. Good. Okay. So this is a teshuvah of his. We'll go through it. Hopefully, we'll finish it today, and then we'll begin to start the more modern stuff. And quite fascinatingly, because I always, keep my eye and ear open for these developments, there is a very important documentary came out not long ago, which we'll talk about. Matt Walsh's documentary, and
Matt Walsh.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll do it later. You can bring your popcorn another day, and I don't think we're going to watch the whole thing because it's nearly 1.5 hours. You'll see. This is called a teaser. I need to make sure that you come back tomorrow. That's all. Okay, so here we go. This is a shaila that Rav Evers was asked when he was a communal Rav in Amsterdam, and here's the shaila. Here's the nusach of the shaila. Nishalti poi kehila kadesha Amsterdam halacha lemaisa. Imuta lekabel bochur chaver bekehila seinu misha avar nituach alevare hamin shaloi.
Wait, this is the one you wanted to get. You talked about
that was another one, we did. That was Reb Chaim Rappaport. That we did last time. That was the last. I'm not sure if you were here. Maybe you were. Forgive me. That was the one we did. It looks like this. It's from the Shut Rabboni Europa, and it's that we did. We did that one.
I thought there was a shade of Evers you wanted to get. I was mistaken.
No, there was. You're right. There was one. One was Rabbi Rappaport. I couldn't get my hands on. I got, and then the other one was I tracked down and printed it out from Eitzah Chochmah. And that's this one. Yes, you're quite right. So here was the shaila. No, I know what you're also referring to. There's something I actually want to talk to Dan Gelly. There was a psak both from the London and the Manchester based, but that's regarding Gittin. Maybe we'll talk. Maybe we'll mention that. Okay, so here, this is interesting because I've left this for the last, not because with all due deference and respect to Yedidi Rav Evers Shlita, but not because of his that he is halacha kabasroi as is that he is not because it's more important, but because in a sense it is. Meaning, this is a relatively recent live example of a communal Rav in continental Europe, not Meir Sharim, not Golders Green, not Antwerpen. Mm-hmm. This is the kind of stuff you're going to come across, right? Your Vorstand, that's if you're even asked as a Rav. I have the singular zechus that Baruch Hashem in our Kehillah, I have the ultimate say in terms of applying, as it should be, purely in terms of Jewish identity, right, of membership. And then we do a sort of, as people come in, it's another schmooze, maybe we'll talk about it another time. It is actually, you know what, maybe I'll quickly mention it. So what I currently do, what my Kabbalah in these matters are, there's somebody here applies for membership to Kayot, right? So, what do we do? What do I do? So, I will do what I call a relatively, it's sort of a medium level Birur Yahadus. Let me explain what I mean by this, because this is actually something we kind of spoke about it. That was one of our previous topics. And what I want to share with you, this is my policy. Again, it's not set in stone, and it's not gospel. Is that I have to make it clear. You always have to be conscious when you're taking a public policy decision in a kehillah or something like that it can be used and sometimes taken out of context. As I've had people saying to me, well, so-and-so was a community member in Würzburg, surely that means they're Jewish. If they were accepted there, surely it means they're Jewish. And I have to very politely say that in kol hakavod to whoever, actually, I know the Rav of Würzburg for many years, but assuming that he has the say, that it was, one cannot rely on that. And every Rav of every kehillah has to decide what is right for their kehillah. So of course we have to be, being makar of people goes without saying. You want to come and daven and come and we'll support you and find you chavrusas, etc. Of course, with the greatest of pleasure. But because it will always be, Rabbi Say, one of the most important things, always be conscious that your actions and your decisions may come back to bite you, to haunt you. It is the law of thoughtless, unintended consequences. And as a Rav, I'll share something with you, mitoich that. One of the most important lessons I learned from my Rebbes in Rabbonos, Reb Shimon Weingarten Shlita, and something also after working with and observing Dangeli Shlita, the very first hoira'ah in Torah Shabbat Peh that we ever come across, so to speak, at the beginning of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, right? The Messiah of Torah, Misinai, Yeshua, Zakenim, Nevi'im, Anshe Knesses Agdoila, and then you have two incredible words, Heim Omru. This is, so to speak, the beginning of Torah Shabbat Peh, recorded Torah Shabbat Peh, in the sense that Klal Yisrael finds its voice. Heim Omru. So until now it was passive, receptive. Kibbel Torah Misinai, Msorah Yeshua, Yeshua Lizkenim, Lizkenim Nevi'im. Nevi'im gave it over to the Anshe Knesses Agdoila, and then they opened their mouth. Klal Yisrael, through their rabbinical, through the Einei Ha'edah, their representatives, they opened their mouths. Heim Omru Shloisha Dvarim. Do you hear the significance that is loaded in those words? It's such a significant phrase. Heim Omru Shloisha Dvarim. What is the very first thing? Havu Masunim Badin. Be deliberate. Mosun is to be langsam. One of the most, take your time. Think things through. In English we say be deliberate, be considered. Don't rush to judgment. That's the first thing. And if you actually go through this, now that I'm doing it already, let's finish off the Mishnah, you'll see that all three statements kind of go in the same direction. It's my own concept, I haven't seen it anywhere, but this is what I think is prat in the Mishnah. The first thing they say is, Hevu Masunim Badin. If you are an Anshe Knesses Agdoila, if you will be a communal representative, a Rav, your words carry weight, they have significance, and be conscious of them. And especially when it comes to policy and making decisions, because you have to paskin the person, the context, but you also absolutely have to have an eye that the rabbi said this, he did that, and people are not always able or willing to understand the context. And it's your job to then be your own PR person, in a sense, to clarify, to make sure everybody understands what's going on as much as possible. And sometimes you have to not say something which you would like to, or vice versa, because of you know where it's going to go and the consequences. So the first thing is have a musunim badin. Take a chill pill. Sleep on it. Think about it. And mitoich that I will tell you, in my 25 years plus of experience in Rabbonos, the number of times that you have to act quickly is maybe 5% of all of the situations you will be. Now, at first instance, you will think it's 40% or it's 50%. It isn't. You have to ask yourself one thing. Well, first of all, I mean, is anybody currently potentially in danger? That's the first. Very rare. Very rare. Guy's beating his wife now. Had that call. I said, call the police. I'll come round. Pleasure. Come round immediately. He's beating me now. I knew it wasn't true, but that's another story. Call the police. Somebody, a child, or somebody is even suffix sakona. Somebody, there's a really reasonable grounds that somebody is currently in danger, then you have to act. Shalom Bayis, he's divorcing her, you must come round tonight, he's been shouting. Very, very, very rare that there is that the need for speed overrides the need for deliberation. Kimat doesn't happen. I learnt it sometimes the hard way because I was younger and more hot-headed, and thinking, you know, I could and would save the world kind of thing. And this is, it's an emergency. And people's concept of what is an emergency, it could mean it's very important. It could mean it needs to really move up your list of priorities and deal with it immediately. But just to act now, very, very rare. You will come, it's very, very rare. Have a masunim badin. Vehemidu talmidim harba. The next thing is have many talmidim. Why? What do you think that does? Have many talmidim. Why? Since when do we focus on quantity above quality? Vehemidu talmidim harbe. Why? Why should that be necessary? Because when you have many talmidim, you have a check and balance. Yeah. You have different viewpoints and different perspectives to challenge you and to help you defend and clarify your own thinking. If you're an Emerson Talmud, I know I do most of the talking, and maybe yes, it challenges you. The things I've learned from my Talmudim over the years, it's not a cliche. A good Talmud would challenge the Rebbe. Not challenge in the sense of I don't accept your authority, but challenge as in bring their own perspective to challenge the thinking, crystallize, refine, distill, get it clear. Hamidu talmidim harbe va'asu siyog la'Torah. If you have power, now you have power, Anshe Knesset Gdola, to legislate and to asu siyog la'Torah, use it to guard, not to just do your own authority. It's all going in the same direction. Al kol ponim. That was a very long-winded introduction here as to why this is going to be our last tshuva that we're learning on the subject here, because this is a reality. So the level of birur yadus that I demand for membership is not the same that is necessary before you marry somebody. The fact that somebody is a member of Kayot does not necessarily mean that I will automatically be Masada Kiddushin for them.
But why not? Why don't you just do the strictest one and then the person...
Because it's expensive and time-consuming, and involves digging into people's past, sometimes in a way which is... it is necessary. And by the way, this is a Kabbalah. If you really want to know, before I came here, this was one of the shilas I asked of Rav Zimmerman Shlita, who is an expert in especially in this, because it's also a question of, what do I come here and then open up all the files immediately? And then just start questioning everybody? I mean, that was one of my tzedadim, what to do. And he said, Lo mitan aleph. And he's right. He doesn't need my Haskam. Anybody who's already been accepted is here. That's de facto. But if you then come to marry one of their kids or something, he said, that's the time that that's an appropriate juncture. It's appropriate. Everybody understands it. It's not negative. And let me tell you, in some cases, especially because of the nature of our Kehillah, and German Jewry, Russian, Ukrainian, Bali Tshuva, Geirim, it's complicated. It's a complex landscape. It also took me time to get the right connections in Eretz Yisrael, and because my job then is that if I take responsibility for marrying somebody, I will then be able to give them the paperwork and the clarity that that's it, it's done, game over. Nobody will ever, it'll be accepted by the Rabbanut, etc., etc. Whereas otherwise, there are cases of people just going and marrying people doing a very minimal birur yahadus, and then they move to Monsi or wherever it is, and then their kids want to get married, and the Rav is long dead. I think that's... So you have a part of the job is to do it once and do it properly, and do it at the right juncture. And that, I think, is careful, thought through, appropriate. I'm sharing this with you. I know it's on YouTube now. I don't mind it. I think that I think is good policy. That is smart, and that is something that you it's only an example, but it came out of taking advice, even as a Rav, especially as a young Rav. You take advice, you ask. And I wasn't young, I was, 50 plus, and I sat down with Rav Zimmerman, and I had 20 plus years of experience in a Baal Tshuva Kehillah, but I knew the landscape was a bit different, and so never be too arrogant, ask. I don't know if you were in shul when I said in the Drosh a couple of weeks ago, a story that we had about, I know you're not here on Shabbos, I'll say it very quickly. You guys probably were here, maybe. I once had a Shalom Bayis issue which I was dealing with. Rather, I'd handled over, and that's another whole topic. Maybe we should do that. I was working with clinicians, with therapists he had a therapist, she had a therapist. It was a very severe case.
Yeah.
Remember the story?
Yeah.
And remember? And what did I ask? I knew it stunk. Who is your supervisor? Said to the therapist. Game over. The minute said no supervisor, everybody needs a supervisor. You two have one, it's called your wife. It's Hashem B'Korov Mamash. It's Hashem. We all, and that's actually, it's not a joke, that is part of it. Somebody to keep us in check, keep us, and who loves us and wants us to grow and encourages us, and that's this is what it's about. It's so we all need, so never also you have to have a supervisor, you have to have somebody that you can and are prepared to refer to and say, I don't know, I'm gonna ask, etc. Okay, I'll call upon him. I know we spent most of the show. I do apologize. Let's start this. This is why I like this. This is continental mainland Europe, relatively recent, and this is the sort of stuff you are going to come up against. I mean, then you got there's bigger issues as to how you work with your Vorstand, with your Rat or whoever, the lay leadership, nurture and cultivate your lay leadership, and that's another story. Not everybody's zeicher to have a Michael. What's the name as you have in Osnabrück or whatever? He's the unfortunate exception that proves the rule of how important it is to have the right sort of lay leadership. I'll call upon him. So here was, let's go to the Lemaisa. So he was asked in Amsterdam, is it mutter to accept to membership somebody who has already undergone this gender reassignment surgery, or whatever they're calling it today. Ha'ish hazeh haya zochor mileidosai bevadous lefi mivne ha'ivarim achitzonim v'apnimim. This was a guy. This was a dude. No question. Phenotype, shmenotype. Sorry, it was a dude. Avol ekev machala shigionit hechlitu l'shanis es minoi. Because of a let's put it politely, I think to translate it as it is would be, it calls it a mental illness, and we will come to discuss that when we talk about the changes from DSM-4 to DSM-5. I think I mentioned it already. But because of a psychological issue, shall we say, he decided he's going to change his gender. Hakirorogim kan mevatzim nituach kazeh v'lo mitbayshim mizeh. Rav Evers, bless him, is not, in English we say, he's not backwards in coming forwards. In other words, he doesn't always, it's not a criticism, it's just a statement of fact. This is not, the language that he's using here is certainly not politically correct. It's certainly not a criticism. But he's saying that the Holland, as we know, is a hotbed of liberalism. It has something. I think it has the lowest age of consent in Europe, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's 14. I might be wrong. I don't want to go on record. I need to check, but I'm pretty certain. You do a Google on not now, but on the age of consent around the world, and Holland is one of the lowest. As we know, you've got the red light district is a tourist attraction. You turn something into an attraction. So they're very open in that sense, and therefore, whereas, for example, in Germany, did you know? I believe the law might be changing soon, but it is actually technically illegal for an abortion clinic to advertise their services. It's illegal. In Holland, I imagine it would probably be illegal not to, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So this is what he's saying. So therefore, and this is the thing that we need to understand. Medicine does not operate in a vacuum. It operates in a societal context. And in Holland, they trumpet their hatzlacha, umefarsimim et hatzlachosam beitonim rachmuna litzlam. They trumpet their surgical successes in the newspapers. Ha'ish hazeh over anituach lifnei kishtemes rishana. This guy underwent this surgery 12 years ago. And he changed his phenotype. Yes, he changed he got rid of his genitalia, whatever. He then married a Catholic man He is now a woman, and in Dutch law, and therefore he married he's now a woman, and he married a Catholic man civil marriage. Lifnei kama shonim meisa isha katoli. A number of years ago, this Catholic man died. And this person now had some sort of hisayrus and is chayzer b'tshuva. He's now 53 years old. This fellow showed up in the Kehillah in Amsterdam. Why he mentions this, I'm not too sure. Fascinating. From his voice, you can't tell whether it's male or female. Brackets. It's somewhere in between. You know, sometimes you speak to somebody and you can tell immediately just by the voice. You can turn on the radio, and 99.9% of times, it's very rare you get an androgynous voice. Very relatively rare. Externally, from his clothes, his dress, everything else, he looks like a woman. But I know, says Rav Evers, that this was a dude. My shaila is, should we accept him as a chaver in our kehillah? And here is where we get to the nub of the issue. Depending on the type of kehillah you're in, Baruch Hashem, in this kehillah it's different, but in English, we used to say that it's called as follows. It's a little bit cruel, it's a bit unkind, but we called it hatchers, matchers, and dispatchers. Which means, when is the time that a secular Jew is likely to come into contact or need the services of a rabbi? Hatchers, matchers, and dispatchers. Birth, weddings, and funerals.
Yeah.
Right? And that is actually the power base of a number of mainstream synagogal communal organizations. If it wasn't for the fact that there is a cultural thing to be married by a rabbi, to have a bris, and a funeral, if it wasn't for that, I'm not sure many organizational synagogal and communal organizations would even continue to exist. Right? Because most of these, the mainstream ones, are primarily not there for Shachris and Eruv Tavshilin and whatever, and Chumash Rashi. It's a sad reality. And this is one of the ways that you hold on to that power base, is by saying people still, for some cultural reason, even if they're secular, they want to be buried in a Jewish cemetery and have a rabbi there, blah, blah, blah. Well, you can only do that if you have membership. This is how they make their money. Yeah? You have to have membership in a kehillah in order to be buried in our cemetery.
In Berlin it's different, though, no? With the central kehillah?
I'm not too sure how it works here. And that's an interesting, something we actually need to do. We really should have our own friedhof, that's the truth.
The kayot, you mean?
For sure. There's actually a problem. By the way, halachically, being buried in the same thing as Rishoim is a halachic issue. So there are some, it's a complicated, that's actually an interesting thing. Sometimes you build a mechitza, and it's not pashut.
The Hashtrasse has a mechitza, no?
Sorry?
Hashtrasse is like an Orthodox.
No, it has own fields. But Weissensee has fields for intermarried couples that...
Weissensee nobody gets buried anymore.
No,
I have no idea.
The kayot gets buried in Weissensee,
No,
Hirstrasse.
Oh, okay.
Hirstrasse.
nobody gets buried.
Hirstrasse, there's no mechitza between Shomer Shabbos and not Shomer Shabbos.
There are different fields. If it's a full family, yeah, you can be buried...
No, my question is there a mechitza? Again, it's not for now. It's an interesting... It's a discussion. You need to be aware there is such a concept.
Area.
For Shomer Shabbos?
No wall, but separate.
For Shomer Shabbos?
Oh, an own field.
I did not actually know that.
I'm not sure what the criteria is.
It's almost empty, though.
No,
long may it remain empty, mitzad echad.
Right.
I think as the kehillah gets a little bit older, it is something in the next 5 years we actually do need to, it should be a strategic aim of the kehillah to start exploring what can be done. We should also have our own chevra. Baruch Hashem, I am so blessed many of my colleagues in England, that's kind of what they spend most of their time doing. Which is so, Baruch Hashem, we have the sound of young voices learning and singing and davening, and that's amazing. But people do get old and people do die. That's a reality. So it's just something to think about. Anyway, Al Kolponim. So he says the reason, this guy is becoming a Baal Tshuva, but because membership, in order to be able to get buried, you need membership in the Kehillah. So therefore, so there were those who said, you can't deny this person the right to be buried as a Yid. You see, interesting. Do you see what's happened there? This fellow has a right to be buried as a Yid. I actually have issue with that language. How would you take issue with that language? There are no rights in Yiddishkeit. You know that. There is a chiyuv of kvura. Now, you can't bury yourself, right? Generally speaking. So that means there is a chiyuv. We can argue about who the chiyuv is mutal on. Is it on the kids, on the kehillah, but there is a chiyuv to bury. It's not about the language. I don't like the language, but I understand what he's saying. There are those who argue and say, well, if he has a right to be buried as a Jew, where's this right come from, by the way? I mean, anybody like to show me where there's a right to be buried as a Jew? No, even forgetting halacha. Let's say you don't. When do you have a right to be buried as a Jew? You know where this argument takes you down the road of? You have to be very, very careful. Let me give you a sideshow, seeing as we're not going to get through this Truma today anyway. But no, I don't regret it. This is important stuff I want to share with you, and it's min hashamayim. These things are coming together. It's turning into a bit more of a practicum. That's fine. Yeah. There was a story. There is in London, there is the largest secondary school, Jewish secondary school in Europe. It's called JFS, the Jewish Free School. When I've been there a number of times to doing talks and stuff, and well over 1,000 kids. Wow. Massive, big campus. It's government run, it's government money, but it's called the JFS, the Jewish Free School. I think it's a kilometre, it's acres, it's massive. You can imagine. Over 1,000 kids. Now, the criteria for being accepted there was that you had to be halachically Jewish. And London based in, until the 1990s is when this kind of blew up, if I remember. I can do the research on it. I was living in London at the time. I remember I actually was on a panel in one of the Federation shuls about this, because it became a political hot potato. Until that point in time, it was quite clear that the London based in had the custodianship, and they were in charge in terms of the definition and the decision of mihu Yehudi, right? And they would then decide. Then the pressure came from, as it always does, from the left, from the liberals, whatever. And there was a particular story, if I'm not mistaken, of somebody who was not halakhically Jewish, but I think they were children or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. Sorry, Binyamin, can this be done in 5 minutes, or does it have to be done now?
Net printing for the learning.
Okay, fine. I'm finished in 5 minutes. Besides, so the pressure came to say, and here's how the argument went, and this is the way, of course, that the newspapers and everybody picked up on it. The secular Jewish press. This is a person who Hitler would have gassed. How can we deny them a Jewish education? Again, this was the argument. Oh, this was the thrust of the argument. This is somebody who would have been, because I think they were actually, I don't remember exactly, but whether they were or whether they weren't grandchildren of survivors or whatever. But this is somebody that would have died in Auschwitz for their Jewish identity, and you're going to deny them a Jewish education?
That would have gassed gypsies and communists as well.
Right.
Let's get them all Jewish education.
Yeah, but the gypsies don't want to be. The gypsies don't claim to be. Sorry,
they
don't claim to be Jewish, and they're not interested in Jewish education. What's the real flaw in the argument? Well, the first thing is...
It sounds very bad. It sounds very bad. But the rule for Hitler to choose who will be guest and not was not chosen by the London-based and in this school.
You're absolutely right. But I would say much stronger than that. I would say much stronger than that.
Nazis don't define who's Jewish.
Thank you. First of all, there's two flaws with that, by the way. There's two flaws with this argument. The first, and they're both equally valid and potent, and you need to maintain a cool head. The first thing is, since when is halacha decided by an emotional argument?
Right.
This is very emotive. Since when is halacha decided on the basis of an emotional? Make an intellectual argument. Make a rational argument. This is not a rational argument. Saying this is an emotive, very powerful, and it's laden with huge emotion, and that emotion is important. What we think and we care about what happened in the Holocaust, Rahman al-Islam, but it is wicked. It is pernicious. It is actually wicked, and I'm not suggesting that it was consciously wicked, but it is really wicked to use the memory of the Kedoshim to make an invalid halachic point on the basis of emotional, number one. And number two, and here is how I would put it, and I'm deliberately throwing it back in an emotive way, because you always have to fight fire with fire. I would say, okay, so guys, you have given Hitler the posthumous honor, the posthumous victory of becoming a posek now for us. That's what you've really done. Really?
Yeah.
We're going to allow him, Yemach Shemai, to now posthumously give him a victory in terms of our not only killing 6 million of our brothers and sisters, but giving him the power to decide who is and who isn't. That we should self-define on the basis of that mass murderer. Is that what you're doing? You see what I've done there? I've flipped it round, but I've done it. I'm fighting fire with fire. Because when I say it like that, I've used the emotion as well. You see what I've done? Instead of you did it in a very good and intellectual and dispassionate way. I think and you have to use, if that is the battleground, if that's where somebody who's coming from that hasn't thought it through, not only hasn't thought it through, but where's the mistake come? The mistake has come from a legitimate emotion, love, care, etc. And that is what's warped it. So just flip that round. Use that. You understand? And that is what, so the right to be buried, so the right to a Jewish education, that such a person has a right to a Jewish education.
We don't have rights.
Well, not only we don't have rights, but the way that the decision of who is and who isn't Jewish is the province of halacha. Okay, I think we'll actually stop here for today.